Let me tell you about the time my friend Danny tried to rope me into what later turned out to be a multi-million-dollar con. He's now serving a life sentence for murder, by the way. So it really started when Danny invited me on an all-expense-paid trip to Puerto Vallarta, that he was picking up the tab on it, and we flew first class. We stayed in a penthouse suite with a private pool. He bought me expensive clothing and gadgets, all these things that I would need to go on the trip. And it was all a lot of fun, right? Who's going to say no to being spoiled in this way, especially by a friend? Now, the thing you need to know about Danny is that he had a story. And this story was that when he was a minor, he was a victim of a man named Tom White. And at the time when we went on the trip to Puerto Vallarta, he was in the midst of a lawsuit against this man, Tom White, who he alleged did these things to him. And he had always said that, he was finally going to get justice. He talked about how wronged he had been. And he also mentioned how big of a payout he was going to receive from this settlement that he was going to get from Tom White. Now, I don't remember exactly the amount that he was claiming. It was a lot, and even by today's standards, because it was over $10 million, and this was 20 years ago. And now, looking back, what I've learned is that he was telling this story and he created this story, although let me be clear that there was a lawsuit against Tom White. Tom White did exist. The allegations that Danny made were found to be true. Let's say that. They were found to be true, and he did receive this settlement. So it wasn't some concocted story. Well, I take that back. So I don't know for sure whether it was a concocted story, but in the legal system, he was found to be a victim, and he did receive this settlement. We'll leave it at that. I'm not going to go into details about Danny's settlement, but the point of the story is here, where what I'm getting to is that he used this story to build trust with people, to have people sympathize with him, to see him in a certain way, and to be protective of him at the same time. Okay, so now you know the background of Danny and the kind of person that he was. He was only a few years older than me, let's say somewhere between 2 and 4 years older than I was. And when we finally got to Puerto Vallarta, it was a lot of fun, and it started out fun, but it quickly changed into something else. So once we got there, and we had been there for like a day or two, Danny then told me that we were actually there for a purpose. We had a purpose to be there. He was there to meet with other local young guys who he claimed were victims of Tom White in Mexico. And he was setting up a lawsuit, a secondary lawsuit against Tom White with these young local guys. And the claim is that they were victims when they were minors, and they were adults now. And so he started meeting with these guys, and I was present for this happening. So the tone and nature of the trip quickly changed from a fun vacation to seeking justice. And Danny was positioning himself as a crusader for these impoverished young victims, and at least that's what he wanted me to believe. At this point, it started to feel like I wasn't there by accident. I started feeling like Danny had brought me there to become a part of this lawsuit that had nothing to do with me. Now, I was never explicitly asked to do anything. No one ever sat me down and said, hey, Jesse, we need you to say this, or we need you to do that. But there was some pressure. It felt like I was being included in these conversations for a particular reason. The energy was there, the vibe was there, that they wanted me to participate in this. And by them, I mean there was Danny and his lawyer, a woman who was like a counselor for the young Mexican guys, a couple other people who were also on the sidelines. Now, you see, I had taken all these gifts. I had taken the trip. I took all these expensive clothing and gadgets. Like, I had accepted this. And by doing so, it felt like I was obliged to participate in what they were doing. And at the time, I was probably, I want to say somewhere between 19 and 20 or 18 and 20. I was very young. And I was kind of the right age and from the right place who could have been a victim of Tom White because I was from San Francisco and I would have been a minor at the time that both Tom White and I were both living in San Francisco. So I wanted nothing to do with what Danny and his lawyer and these young guys were doing. I made it clear that I wasn't interested in participating or getting myself involved in something that had nothing to do with me. And once I did that, the tone, the nature, the way I was treated quickly changed. And it became like I was excluded from everything. They moved me to a different room, isolated me from everything so that I couldn't see or hear what they were doing. And at the time, what they were doing and what the impression that I got was that these young men maybe weren't victims at all, but were being coached by Danny and his lawyers on what to say, how to say it, being fed information to which they would then agree to, and then be given gifts, money, shown a very good time. And to me, that read as not victims. So it became clear to me now, as I've gotten older, and maybe even a little bit at the time, that all of this, the setup, the invitation to go to Puerto Vallarta, the shopping sprees, being shown a good time, was all part of a manipulation on Danny's part to potentially get me to be a part of this. And now it has come out many years later, over 20 years later, that Danny has had a long string of very successful cons that he's pulled off, and this was just one of many. And it has also come out that my feelings, my instincts at the time were actually correct, as they did have a lawsuit against Tom White. They did get a massive payout. These young men were paid a significant amount of money. Everybody got their share. But it was later overturned because it was found out that these men were being paid off to give false testimony. And Tom White ended up dying in prison, in a Mexican prison, based on this alleged fraudulent lawsuit that my friend Danny had orchestrated. That I came very close to being a part of something that I should never be a part of. How lucky I was to not be a part of it and to be able to return home, because as it turned out, later I would introduce Danny to another person who he would go on to commit murder with. And I'll tell you all about that in the next story. If you'd like to hear it, let me know.